Okay, now we have our tails, which are going to hang down from the back side of our Dodger that helps deflect the rain off. And we did these in two sections when we did the cutting and the patterning. So we need to join them together with our 1/2 inch seam right here. So we're going to join those two pieces before we do anything else. And you want to make sure that you have a pout and a sout. Otherwise, your curves are going to be all going the wrong direction. And then you want to put them face to face. Face to face meaning that your sout and your pout, where we had marked the facing, are actually facing each other.
Please excuse the plotter vacuum noise. It'll be off in a second.
And so a 1/2 inch. Okay, we have our sout and pout sewn together in the center. And we're going to do the same thing with this center. Only these are all done where you may call it face up because I've marked everything so that you can see what's going on as we're going here. And seeing how these will be sandwiched together, you don't want to seam those the same. So on this one here, we put your centers together and you want them coming up toward you with the words and all the notches on the top. You want the seam to be made above where the other one was below. That way, when we sew these two together, then we'll have finished centers on both sides. So this one, you'll see the letter when you're sewing them together. This one here, the letter was sandwiched inside. So you just want to do the opposite, only with the center seam. Now you can see we have the bottom of this one, top of that one, just like I explained. Your pouts together and your souts are together, okay? So what we want to do now is we want to put them together where the seams are both sticking out because we're going to sew this edge and then we're going to flip them and this will be the outside. So right now we want to make sure that those are together and we're going to sew this outer edge here all the way through. Now we have the notches on this side. We can also use those for this edge. Now with cutting that out, if you find a little bit of variance, I wouldn't worry too much about it, just so that your facings are laying flat on top of each other. And then we're going to start here and we're going to sew the 1/2 inch seam all the way through using your furthest edge.
The extreme ends of this tail Deb will sew shut. That's that 3-inch wide end. It's not necessary to do that because if you remember right, we made these tails long, so you'll actually have to cut off extra fabric on the ends. So don't worry about sewing the end shut. Just sew down the length of the tail as Deb is doing now.
And there's your notches lined up. And just like before, you want to kind of walk it out, flatten, and kind of hold it about 1 foot away. And you can use basting tape on this if you want. I prefer not to. It's just what you're used to and what helps. So you want to line up this seam here when you get to the center. And you want to flip one seam toward the machine and one seam toward you. That way you'll be able to flatten it out better and it'll look nicer on the finished edge rather than having all the bulk on one side of that seam.
If you choose to use double-sided tape, make sure you do not sew into the glue because the glue will be visible when you reverse this assembly apart.
And there's our sout.
And when we get to the end here, you see Deb finish that as well. We'll have to cut that shorter later on.
Okay, now we're going to flip these tails And we're going to top stitch right at very close to the edge, similar to that we did to the front panel on the Dodger.
We'll cut some relief notches at these curves. That'll help it to lay nice and flat as we turn this assembly right side out. So she's doing it at this curve, and then she'll also do it at this curve. Be sure you don't cut into the stitches that you just sewed in place. Then turn the assembly right side out.
Again, we have pout and pout.
We've taken it over to the sewing machine to do a top stitch approximately an 1/8 inch from that seam line that we did previously. Keep the panel nice and flat.
And there are 2 of our notches that are falling right on top. Always a good sign.
Take your time, make sure the panel's flat and the seam is pushed out to the
Coming to our
extreme
inner curve.
right edge.
And just like on that front of the Dodger, you want to work ahead of the foot on the machine, approximately 1 foot out to try to push that seam in and get it ready to sew. And you don't want to sew up too close to where you're holding it. That way you have plenty of room to work it back into it. Okay. Now remember we had these notches cut out, and that's for the strapping to enter to the Dodger frame to tie it down. And then we cut out these little backers here, and you just put that underneath of it here. So that this back edge is lining up at least to tack it down with. And then just trace your cutout.
Deb's using the yellow grease pencil. She should have used the soapstone pencil. She probably just didn't have it handy.
Cut that
The
out.
yellow grease pencil works okay, but it's harder to get out of the fabric.
Okay, so you put your patch underneath here, and we're going to sew it around. And we're going to sew it around so that the words are up that we've written for our pout and our spout, because this will be coming around and finishing off this edge so that we don't have to bind it. And this piece will actually be toward the top when it's finished, so you want that finished edge showing. Okay, so we just put this against here, and you want to sew your 1/2 inch seam around it. This is similar to the front of it where we had our long facing, but we only have to face just this opening for the strap on this piece. Then again, you want to go through and make your cuts here so that it's easier to flip, and we'll top stitch it once we get it flipped. About every 1/2 inch or so around, just making sure that you don't cut in through your stitching, just up to
This
it.
procedure is obviously repeated for the other strap opening on the other end.
We're going to pull this facing around. And once this is pulled around, as you see, the raw edges will be on the top that the pout is written on. So then we will be flipping it over to the finished side and pushing this out in the same manner that we did the other facings. And we're going to top stitch like 1/8 of an inch in, just like we did the other ones.
This may look difficult, but it's not. You've already done it with the facing, so you probably can tackle this quite nicely.
And there we have a nice finished edge, which you will see that the Dodger frame will be coming through here on the cover, and your strap will go through to anchor it. And the facing, again, the facings are on the pout side and the spout side, and you don't have to worry about any of this because it's going to be tucked up underneath with the frame, and it won't cause any problems. Okay, now what we're going to do is base down a 1/2 inch edge here that we're going to apply our zipper to.
Deb's applying the double-sided tape to this edge of the
Lock
back
everything
zipper
up.
sleeve.
I'm going to pull that up and sew a 1/2 inch fold here.
Try to keep the hem here a 1/2 inch down the entire length. We'll be lining up a zipper to that hem line later on.
Okay, now on the end here, we also want to have that finished off. So what we're going to do is just create the same hem on the end of it, just like we did along the side.
We'll obviously do that to the opposite end as well.
The same thing on the other end. First we're going to sew down the hems on the end, and then we're going to put our zipper on the edge that we just folded. And again, this is just so that our zipper will have a finished edge look on it once we get our top done. Okay, now that we have our edge basted down where the zipper is going to go, we have our center mark on here. We want to bring that straight across. And if it varies a little bit, it's not going to be that big a difference, but you do want to have at least 1 inch either side of here so that your zipper slides where they come together. You want to have at least 1 inch either side for the gaps. So I'm going to mark those 1 inch out.
On this back zipper sleeve where the zippers come together at the center, the gap can be as much as 12 inches. So if it's more than 1 inch on each side, don't worry about it. It can be up to 12 inches.
Have our zippers there. And it just so happens that the zippers that we have here, your starter's going to be clear out here to the outside edge so that you can start here and zip them in. And that'll go for the pout and the south side both. And these here, we just happen to be the right length that we need. Now, on these, we're using a double pull slide, and yours will probably be a single pull. We're just temporarily out of the single, so we're going to use a double on this demonstration. But yours will be like this, and you won't have another slide on the other side. So you want to make sure when you put that down that your slide is down against the fabric that you're sewing it to before you apply it. Otherwise, your slide's going to end up inside the pocket and you're not going to be able to slide it up and down. Okay, now we want to base this zipper down.
Zeorite Dodger kits will include 2 longer zippers, and for a tuba we'll include 1 short zipper. The 36-inch short zipper will be used for the center zipper sleeve.
And make sure that you line it up here and put your basting tape on the side that's going to be going down to it. You can either put your basting tape on this umbrella or the zipper. I prefer the zipper because that way you know where you're going to stop at out into here.
This back zipper sleeve obviously requires the 2 longer zippers.
You want to be sure that when you put your basting tape down that it is close to the outside edge so that it doesn't interfere with your slider. Now we're going to put it right here so that it is even at this end. You can have some umbrella hanging over.
On some canvas applications, we try to hide the teeth. Here you can see the teeth are exposed. It's not going to matter much because this is the underside of the Dodger, and these teeth are not going to be exposed to the UV, so you can easily have an edge just like this.
If you have a fold over of a 1/2 inch, it should pretty much fall to where you have your gap. If you keep this edge even with the edge of your hem. Now this one here coming out to where we're okay because, as I say, the teeth fall back here, so I'm just going to go ahead and let that edge fall, and then we'll sew that down. We've got the 1/2 zipper on here. But you can leave that zip together if you want to. I just find it's a little bit easier with only half of it on there. But you don't want to take the other side of this zipper and put it here. So you want to just kind of push that back and make sure that you grab your other zipper. And again, we're going to want to make sure that it zips toward the inside. And knowing that this is going to fall okay for us for ours, we're just going to go ahead and unzip it, baste it down to here, and then we'll be ready to sew them on. Okay, we're coming out the same here at the center. So again, I'm just going to let it fall down right toward the center there. And we're going to flip it over here now, and we see that we do have a gap between our teeth and this umbrella all the way through. Okay, now we're going to come along and we're going to sew on the edge of the zipper here, and it's going to sew your finished edge down at the same time.
We're sewing this with the Sailrite 111 sewing machine, and you can see the stitch is close enough to the teeth without using a roping zipper foot. Using an Ultrafeed machine, you can move the needle bar left, right, and center if it's a zigzag straight stitch machine.
When you get down so far, you lift up the foot and then slide the end of the slide your zipper on past your foot.
They're locking, so you have to pull on the forward.
I'm trying. Okay, we got that, so we're going to go right back down, keep right on going.
With an Ultrafeed LS1 machine, the foot's small enough to get close to the teeth without a roping zipper foot as well.
And then you always want to make sure that you back tack at the end. And you can keep right on going right straight across to the other one, and then back tack on the end. Now we have our finished edge. First thing you want to do is zip on the other side back onto the zipper. That way it'll be already there to mark as we need to on the top panel when we get to it, and you're not going to lose it underneath some extra fabric or something.